It is notable that the history of food in medieval Europe was quite complex, as this period in time was characterized by distinct dietary habits and patterns. There are many factors that contributed to this complexity, including the geographical location, economic status, religious beliefs, and cultural preferences. In this video, we will explore the various factors that contributed to the dietary habits during this period. Europe, in the Middle Ages, saw a shift from hunting, fishing, and harvesting wild crops to agriculture. The change in lifestyle resulted in a raised number of livestock and crops. Because of increased crop production, the population grew, food was abundant, and eventually malnutrition rates increased among the peasants. There were two impacts of famine on the peasantry. It displaced and impoverished peasants who were unable to produce enough food for themselves, and also impacted their ability to provide adequate nutrition for their children. The food served to a person in the Middle Ages was symbolic of their status and class. Servants, for example, were given lower quality food than their masters, because they were seen as inferior. The higher the social status, the better the food. The peasants' diet in the Middle Ages was largely made up of cereals such as oats, barley, and rye. These were eaten with vegetables and legumes. There was also a lot of dairy products in the peasants' diet. They also ate fruits when it was available, as well as fish and meat when they could afford it. Peasants often ate rye bread as their main food in the medieval era. Due to its availability and ease of cultivation, rye was a cheap crop for peasants to feed their families. People in wealthier classes ate wheat bread, as it is more delicious and less dense. Bread was a common and a popular meal in many households. Yet still, officials had to make sure that even the poor could afford it. England, in the 13th century, enacted laws concerning how bread was made and sold. Price controls were imposed on bakers, so people could buy bread for a penny, at least in some quantities. However, some bakers did not like the new law and tried to cheat customers. It was even alleged that some bakers added metal inside the bread to increase its weight. The habit of deceiving customers is still prevalent in today's society, but in different ways. Bread bowls as we know them today originates from this period. Medieval people called it a trencher. It was used to serve foods like meat or sauces. Elite members of society or those with benevolence also ate the bread after the meal. If not, the bread would be given to the less privileged members of the society, or animals. People with low social standing during the Middle Ages also ate fish, but not every day. Fish was expensive, and they couldn't afford to buy it as often as they wanted. During Lent, adults were forbidden to eat meat, so they would eat fish instead. While some people drowned themselves in alcohol, others ate fish. Many peasants had livestock such as pigs, chickens, goats, sheep, or cows. The women of their households were in charge of taking care of the gardens and the animals in order to get some milk, eggs, and cheese. When an animal is slaughtered, they keep the skin, which was used for clothing or bedding. The master or lord might provide meat on certain days of the week to keep his serfs healthy, but he normally let them do what they wanted with it. Lack of vegetables means that peasants had to get creative with what they ate, which is probably why so many medieval recipes revolve around meat. Cabbage, onions, and carrots were part of the staple foods of the peasants, as vegetables were considered peasant food by people of high status. Peasants would prepare and pickle meat in order to preserve it for as long as possible, then use breads and grains to fill up on carbohydrates. Fruits was also rare, but when available, it was preserved by drying or by making jams or pies. As far as beverages go, beer was the most common drink consumed by all social classes. It is believed that children drank refreshments with low alcohol content, while adults drank ale and mead, as well as expensive wine, which was only affordable to the wealthy. For most of the early Middle Ages, seasoning and spices were not easily accessible to people across all levels of society. However, some merchants, typically Europeans, sold salt, black pepper, and other spices obtained from the Middle East, Asia, and Africa. Since spices were expensive for the poor, they were mostly used by the wealthy. Sugar became widely used to flavor food and later became available to the poor. A typical peasant meal consisted mainly of carbs, such as bread. Moreover, they ate dairy products, like cheese and butter, since they were also affordable. While these are all good things to eat, they are not always at their disposal. Most people of the medieval ages did not have access to meat like we do today, since it was too expensive. The wealthy mostly ate protein-rich foods, while the poor ate foods rich in carbohydrates. Traditional peasant diet was mostly bread, dairy products, and vegetables. A downside to their diet is that peasants couldn't get as much protein, such as meat, as the average person today. Oftentimes, their protein would be from dairy products. If there was no bread available, peasants would make a dish called pottage by boiling some water with herbs, seasoning, and whatever else they had on hand, usually some sort of vegetables. After that, the dish was thickened with oats or barley. Peasants also made other dishes including cheese-based soups, stews made with beans or lentils, and porridge made with oats or barley. Peasants would typically cook in an oven or over an open fire and eat sitting on the ground or bench, as tables, which was called trestle during the medieval period, were not an integral part of the kitchen of a peasant. In other words, eating with your hands was common etiquette and still practiced by people today. Peasants in medieval Europe loved to snack on dried fruits and nuts such as chestnuts, walnuts, almonds, and hazelnut. During the winter season, chestnuts were roasted or boiled for consumption. Almond milk was widely used among all social classes for cooking. Due to the prohibition of eating eggs during Lent, almond milk was also used for making fake eggs called the mock egg. The life of the medieval peasant was very hard. They had to work from dawn till dusk without much food to sustain them. Nonetheless, they managed to survive.